You were sent to Oklahoma City, 1995. What happened there was the deadliest act of homegrown domestic terrorism in modern American history. 168 people had been killed, including 19 children. Hundreds were injured. You were supervising the prosecution of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, who were accused of being complicit and leading in that destruction. Now, if you are confirmed as Attorney General, which I believe you will be, you will face what is known as the biggest, most complex investigation in Justice Department history, and that is the investigation around the events of January 6th. 230 have been arrested so far. Some 500 are under investigation. We know that the death of at least one police officer is one of the major elements in this investigation. I'd like to ask you to reflect on two things. What's going on in America? Was Oklahoma City just a one-off, unrelated to what happened here? Can you measure, based on what you've learned so far, what kind of forces are at work to divide and destroy the American dream? Secondly, when it comes to this prosecution, are there elements that we should consider in terms of law enforcement to deal with this rising threat to the American democracy?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the committee today. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I don't think that this is necessarily a one-off. FBI Director Wray has indicated that the threat of domestic terrorism, and particularly of white supremacist extremists, is his number one concern in this area. This is coupled with an enormous rise in hate crimes over the past few years. There is a line from Oklahoma City, and there's another line from Oklahoma City all the way back to the experiences that I mentioned in my opening with respect to the battles of the original Justice Department against the Ku Klux Klan. We must do everything in the power of the Justice Department to prevent this kind of interference with the policies of American democratic institutions. And I plan, if you now confirm me for Attorney General, to do everything in my power to ensure that we are protected.
Judge Garland, it goes without saying, but we ought to make it a record. We abhor violence, whether it comes from the right or left, whatever its source. It has no place in responsible constitutional dialogue in America. Currently, though, we are faced with elements that weren't there 25 years ago in Oklahoma City. A proliferation of weapons. Secondly, social media and the internet, which serves as a gathering place for many of these domestic terrorists. What are your thoughts about how we should deal with those elements from the law enforcement viewpoint?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I certainly agree that we are facing a more dangerous period than we faced in Oklahoma City at that time. From what I have seen, and I have no inside information about how the department is developing its work, it looks like an extremely aggressive and perfectly appropriate beginning to an investigation all across the country in the same way our original Oklahoma City investigation was, but many times more. I don't yet know what additional resources would be required by the department. I can assure you that this will be my first priority and my first briefing when I return to the department if I'm confirmed.
Judge Garland, several years ago, I went to an immigration court hearing in downtown Chicago. It was in a high-rise loop building. I met the immigration court judge. She'd been on the job almost 20 years. It seemed like a very conscientious and fair person. She asked me to stay for the docket call, particularly for the first clients on the docket. The first clients on the docket were a 4-year-old girl named Marta. When the judge asked that all of the people in the courtroom be seated, she had to be helped into the chair. It was too tall for her to get into. She was handed a stuffed animal to hold during the hearing. At the same table was a young boy with the unlikely name Hamilton. who was given a little matchbox car, which he played with on top of the table. He was 6 years old. They were the victims of the zero tolerance policy. We remember it well. Thousands of children were forcibly removed from their parents, separated, and many times lost in the bureaucracy. Some have incorrectly stated that that administration policy by the Trump administration was just a continuation of Obama-era policy. That isn't true. The Obama administration did not have policies that resulted in the mass separation of parents and children. And on rare occasions, separations occurred. This was due to suspicion of trafficking or fraud, not because of an intentional, cruel policy to separate children. The Justice Department's Inspector General conducted an investigation of the zero tolerance policy and noted that the Justice Department was, quote, the driving force, close quote, in that policy. There is still a lot that we do not know about that policy and the accountability for the officials who were responsible for it. So let me ask you this. This committee is going to hold oversight hearings to get to the bottom of it. Will you commit to cooperate with those investigations?
Senator, I think the oversight responsibility of this committee is one of its very most important things. It's a duty imposed by the Constitution, and I greatly respect it. I think that the policy was shameful. I can't imagine anything worse than tearing parents from their children. And we will provide all of the cooperation that we possibly can.
I thank you for that. When it comes to congressional oversight, this committee has a role in restoring independence and integrity to the Justice Department through oversight hearings. It has a long-standing tradition of holding annual Justice Department oversight hearings, but sadly, it's been 3 years since the Attorney General has been called before this committee. I pledge that as chairman, I'll hold annual DOJ oversight hearings where members from both sides of the aisle can ask important questions of you in that capacity. I don't want to go into detail, but ask you, obviously, would you agree to cooperate in that commitment to oversight hearing?
Of course, if I'm confirmed, I will certainly cooperate.
And when requests are made for information by members of the committee, I hope that I can also have your commitment to cooperation in providing timely answers.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we will be as responsive as we possibly can. As I said, I have great respect for and belief in the oversight role of this committee.
Thank you. Senator Grassley?
Yeah.